Fire Force Season 2 has been on a roll ever since they kicked it off, but even I couldn't have predicted how many twists and turns they would take with the narratives, and most importantly, the characters who I thought 100% were evil scumbags, and I would never look at them as a shoulder you'd want to lean on in this story. But I think anyone who's had issues with Season 1 not putting the story and characters first and foremost, but rather the action or the kind of simplistic comedy or even the fan service at times, Season 2 corrects all mistakes you might have had with it, in my honest opinion, has become a solid 8.5, 9 out of 10 series so far, and depending on where the remainder of Season 2 goes, it could even get even higher than that, in my honest opinion. Characters like Captain Burns, I was convinced were an evil scumbag working for the church and was someone you would have to put under the ground about 20 feet because he's that powerful and you want to make sure he's not coming back from the dead. After this episode, I kind of want to trust him in ways, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a red herring or not, but it feels like we've misjudged a lot of things in this series, and that's how you know an author actually has many tricks up its sleeve, not someone who just has a couple of things like evil cultist group and church, that's how we're fighting. No, we learned that basically the church is pretty much oblivious all these years of what's been happening, and the character who we keep hearing this history about and the whole idea was basically a shapeshifter, and when he came home to the wife realized that something was missing in terms of the personality and things like that. Just watching this play out, thinking I wanted to see a battle between, we have Benimaru, we have Joker, we have Burns, who doesn't want to see that battle? And at first, when he basically realizes that Benimaru's here, he drops in and says, alright, I'm no longer going to fight you. I was disappointed at first, I'll be 100% easy to admit that, because it's like they were building up to that escalation, and while it makes sense because Benimaru is such a powerful character, it felt like, really, is this the type of person who would back down from a fight, especially considering he was trying to fight Joker? But then when you get the information and when you realize he's not actually a bad guy, it just clicks and you're like, I once again misjudged what Fire Force wanted to be, and in doing so, they're making something far more intriguing, in my humble opinion. I think the idea of just casually talking and revealing this information could have easily fallen flat on its face and felt like a cop-out for not showing a battle so we could see it another day. But rather than it just being like, here's the information, I'm a big bad villain, we're realizing that things aren't as simple and black and white as we originally made them out, and things are starting to click so much more. Seeing that pretty much the reason why you're not just going to expose this whole information because it would kind of tear down society, it's something that makes sense, but when you first hear it brought up and the idea that the church would want to conceal it, you definitely raise a few eyebrows saying like, this is never going to be revealed. But then when you hear from Captain Burnsy, and he's starting to explain things, you're starting to realize that there's more things that we have to investigate before trying to tear down everything that we know. I mean, as far as we know, the person who's been shapeshifting around during that whole invasion from Benimaru's side, like, maybe that's actually the person who's been around for 250 years because these Infernals don't have life expectancies. They can just live as long as they don't have their flames extinguished. And then to see the reveal of who was the person behind all this as he exposes the truth to the church. What in the actual hell? There is so many twists and turns happening in Season 2, and rather than these twists and turns coming from left field, when you really stop and think about everything that we've seen, how characters have acted up until this point, it starts making you view things a lot differently than when you initially saw those episodes. And I'm sure if we went back and rewatched Season 1 now, we're going to discover even more smaller details to how characters are interacting or lines of dialogue that popped up that are going to make us view everything in a completely different light. And while we can say we trust Burns or we trust Joker, we trust Victor, like, we can trust these characters, at the same time, we could be a season down the line and we could see something that makes us not trust them again. I really like the unpredictability of this series and how it's not afraid to really make you say, you don't know what you want to see, and we're going to show you something that's pretty wild. I was so ready to criticize the lack of combat with Captain Burns, and they made me a huge fan of not showing combat because we're realizing that that's not what this guy wanted. When seeing that Benimaru is working with him, it kind of makes you view things in a different way, and that maybe talking is actually the right way to go about this. The thing that I really was hoping to see in this episode the most was what happened to both Joker as well as hopefully Captain Burns' eye, and to see the idea of witnessing the truth and what that cost them, having their eyes just engulfed in flame, Joker not being able to do jack shit. I mean, he was down for the count, and I think most people would be if your eyes engulfed in flames and it feels like your mind seeing the truth of the universe and you just can't comprehend it. Burns, on the other hand, just smacking shit with his face on fire. These characters are badass, and if they actually did all three fight against one another, who knows who would be the winner at this point in time. Back in the day, clearly would have been Burns over Joker, but at this point, Smoker Joker, you never want to take him lightly, otherwise he's going to absolutely kill you. I found it hilarious how Burns was able to cover up everything because only one person got killed. And I'm like, this show, in such cultist kind of organization fashion, as long as there's not mass murder, they can cover it up in some way. And then you even end the episode on pretty much the same thing, seeing the true culprit of the whole infernal debacle here. The idea of a tech company and people who make pharmaceuticals and things like that, that's the one you actually want to investigate, not the church like everyone assumed. And once Victor brings in our boy Shinra, he's going to be killed. Obviously, I don't think Victor is the type of person who's trying to work with them anymore. He may have started out that, but the information that he seeks is clearly with the Fire Force. So I'm curious if he's going to go the route of like telling Shinra, hey, this is what I was doing, let's work together, tear them down. Because why would he expose such things in the paper that he knew was going to get him killed or very much fired in a very brutal fashion? So I'm curious to see where they're going to go with that narrative sort of direction, but it's interesting seeing the other members of the Fire Force kind of like take in this information, realizing that, you know, for Shinra, someone like Joker, someone who he does not trust, he's fought against him, and now he's realizing that Benimaru was working with him, and that's kind of like shattering his realization. The whole idea that the church isn't one to investigate, but it's this company, and it's like, where do you go with that? And all these characters are starting to have to rationalize this and try to figure out ways to cope with it, and it's hard to do so. So that's why I actually really like the simplistic comedy moments that they introduce. It's pretty basic sexual jokes, but honestly, I love the idea of Vulcan saying, hey, come check out my creation, and there's Lisa, and you're like, oh, did he build a robotic Lisa? And Shinra goes to, you know, do a Shinra move. And I thought, okay, you know, it's kind of funny. But then when I realized that pretty much anyone in this Fire Force would do the same thing when you see the sister as well, it was funny to see how everyone just viewed her as a robot because she was so emotionless and still. And honestly, I thought it was a nice addition, especially considering that the last time we saw her, it felt like she wanted to grab onto Vulcan's hand but couldn't because of the fear of Giovanni. So now that she's actually a part of this after her recovery, still scared to tell the full truth, but is actually starting to open up more. There's definitely some good possibilities with her character, and I'm liking seeing, you know, some of those past events that we may not have been thinking about recently actually coming back into play because they are important in the grand scheme of things. That gives me hope for a lot of some of the side characters going forward in the second core of Season 2. Overall, this was great, revealed a lot, and made me look at characters I was 100% sure never trust, need to be put underground, actually being like, I misjudged them, and I can't wait to see where they're going to take everything that we just witnessed going forward. I think last week we were all pretty stunned by the visual production because it looked amazing, especially with the more psychedelic scenes with Smoker Joker. But for an episode that was just talking, they went above and beyond, especially when you got the really like graphic eyes on fire pass and just seeing things like the truth opening up. But even just the dramatic shots and how they're able to shift around, just three characters talking who we're like, Benimaru is the only good person here. Now we're kind of thinking like, okay, maybe everyone's kind of on the same page doing things differently. It was great to see how they constantly shifted up the perspective of when we're just looking at characters talking. It felt very dramatic and there was like intelligent editing there. It wasn't just, okay, since we're not fighting three characters standing still, we can just hold on to this wide shot. No, they were constantly shifting up their presentation. And I think that's why it made the dialogue so interesting, because every time they said something when they were really getting into the meaty substance here, it felt like they really zoomed in or they did some interesting techniques to make it feel as dramatic as the words that we were reading in the subtitles. And that was amazing to me, especially considering how they all got into their performance so well, and just really my mind was blown through and through in this episode. Let me know your theories and thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like to show your support and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.